Sandy, what do I have to do to unmute?
Yeah, no, we can't hear you. Can you hear us? You can't hear us? Oh, you can hear us. Okay, we can't hear you. Was it like last time where your YouTube video didn't even show your volume? Is there like a connection with that type of thing? It's a great time to learn lips. No, I can't hear anything. Oh, there we go.
You hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
It could be. Do you have an external
Yes, thank
mic?
you.
It could be it wasn't fully plugged in.
Thank
It was
you.
like in between the jets.
All right, we're going to start all over again in case you didn't hear me, which sounds like the case. Welcome to Parshat Vayeishev 5782. Very exciting Parsha. This is the beginning of the story of Yosef and his brothers. In this Parsha, we begin, just quick summary, Yaakov treats Yosef as a favorite son. There might be good reasons for that. There might be bad reasons for that. There are different opinions on that subject. We will broach the subject delicately when we get to it, or maybe not. We'll see. Either way, that's the beginning of the Parsha. His brothers get jealous. He tells them dreams that basically imply that he's going to be superior to them. He's going to rule over them, and they get jealous. They get nervous. They begin to think that maybe Yosef is doing something wrong, and they decide, as a very impartial justice system, I'm sure, they decide that he deserves the death penalty. So they want to kill him, and they decide maybe it's not a good idea to kill him directly, so let's just throw him in a pit, and he doesn't die in the pit, and then they sell him, or other people sell him. There seems to be an implication, oh, we'll get to that, but there seems to be an implication, according to at least one opinion, Rav Hirsch, is it Rav Hirsch? The Rashbam also, we'll see. There's different opinions on the subject, but it definitely might be that the brothers watched him being sold and didn't actually get anything out of it. So they saw the pit and they saw the Yishmaelim get there, and maybe the Yishmaelim sort of like bullied them into like giving up all hope that Yosef was something that they could or somebody or something that they had any kind of control over, and then the Ishmaelim sold him to the Midianim, or et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole, as you know, a whole to do about that, and we will hopefully deal with that as well. Meanwhile, back in the home front, Yehuda has his episode with Tamar, which we will also discuss bravely. We will deal with that subject. Apparently, there are groups of people who are afraid to talk about these things. That's not us. There's nothing the Torah doesn't deal with. There's nothing. There's no such thing as rated R Torah, Torah that's only for adults or whatever. Every child in any legitimate Jewish school should be able to be taught the basics of our history, the story of how we became who we are, and why. So the people who don't tell the story of Dinah in last week's Parsha, don't tell the story of Yehuda and Tamar in this week's Parsha, I don't know what they say about David HaMelech or anything like that, or Lot's daughters, but these are not, Ruth and Naomi. There's a lot of stories in the Torah that require delicacy, being told carefully, but it doesn't mean they're not told. It doesn't mean we keep any kind of secrets. All right. Anyway, so that happens with Yehuda, and similarly, very next parak, very next chapter in our story, Yosef himself is seduced in Egypt by his his owner's, let's call it his master's wife, and he is able to fight off that seduction, and he's accused of rape, which is again something that isn't maybe a comfortable topic, but it's it's worthy. There are people who are accused of things they didn't do, and just because they're accused doesn't mean it's true. But today's let's call it today's way of thinking is anybody who's accused is probably guilty. So that would be a big problem for like all of the Chabad rabbis who spent time in jail, and the Vilna Gaon who spent time in jail for false accusations, and Moshe Feinstein. We can go on and on with tzaddikim who spent time in jail when they were accused falsely of something. So Yosef is a paradigm of that. All right, so we'll deal with that as we get to it. Meanwhile, let's get right into the nitty-gritty, the verses themselves. Last year, I was reviewing the video from last year's class, and it seems that we spent an inordinate amount of time, and I mentioned it during the class. We spent quite a bit of time discussing the 37th chapter. Vayeishev, the majority of the story of Yosef and his brothers is in the 37th chapter. Chapter 38 is already the story of Yehuda, and you can take it from there. And there's only like the parsha ends in the end of chapter 40. So there's basically 3 chapters if you care about these things. Remember, these chapters were an invention of Christian monks. So the actual chapter numbers and all that is not a very important thing. The parshiot, that is from Chazal, that's from Kadmonim, from early generations. So that is important to us. Okay, I'm going to share the screen and let's get right into the sources. Where are we? Right.
Sorry, what about Elias?
What about Elias?
Like, was that created by rabbis?
Yes, that was also created by the rabbis, correct. And as you'll notice, Elias aren't always, and even the parshiot don't always coincide with the chapters at all. So like sometimes there's parshiot that start on what's a good example? A few parshiot ago, let's say was it last week? Where we started with Vayishlach. Yeah, last week's parsha. Vayishlach is like 7 verses into chapter 34 or whatever it is. It doesn't start at 34 chapter 1, chapter 34 verse 1. It starts on like verse 7 or something like that. So the Gentiles thought that 7 verses earlier should also be included in this sugya, in this topic, and we for a number of reasons decided that the previous parsha of not Vayishlach, the one before, so whatever. Anyway, the previous parsha, when Yaakov sees the Machanayim, that's how the parsha ends, right? So when he sees the camps of angels, that should be the end of the parsha. For whatever reason, the Gentiles thought that that's somehow an introduction into this week's parsha, so they kept it together, or last week's parsha. Anyway, so that's the Aliyot, something from Chazal. Even the Psukim and the Parshiot are from Chazal, but the chapters and chapter numbers and all that, that's from the Gentiles. Not the verses, the chapters. They took the verses from us. Okay, let's get right into chapter 37. Speaking of, and by the way, there are rabbis, so just in case you ever want to look deeply into Torah and like learn it on a deeper level, you ever pick up a book like the Chatam Sofer or the Or Gedaliahu or something like that, you won't find chapter verse. They won't quote it because it's not. They don't think it's not from the rabbis. It's from the Gentiles, so they didn't even want to use it. So if they want to if they want you to find a pasuk, what they'll say is like Parshat Miketz Shlishi, and they'll tell you what verse, what pasuk in Shlishi, which is very difficult way to find a place. But it's worth the challenge. if you want to learn these higher level books. Okay, let's because that's sort of a side track here. Back to the chapters. 37 verse 3, 37:3, Lamed Zayin Gimel. It says very clearly, V'Yisrael ahav et Yosef. Yisrael, that's Yaakov, loved Yosef, mikol banav, from all of his other sons. He definitely favored him. Now, here it says why. So everybody's like wondering, why did he love him so much? He says here why. Ki ven zikunim hu. He is the son of his zikunim. His what now? Zikunim, strange word. So we usually translate it as old age. He's the son of his old age. Ki ben zikunim hu lo, vasa lo ktonet pasim. And because of that, or maybe not because of that, but maybe he loved him because of this, he made for him a very fancy coat. Yosef and his fancy coat, right? There's a Broadway musical about that. Okay, so now the problem of translating zikunim, there's multiple problems with this, but one of the issues is, why are we calling Yosef the son of Yaakov in his old age? Yaakov had lots of sons in his old age. In fact, he had another son after Yosef, whose name was Binyamin. So if he really loves his son the most, because he is the son of his old age, the son he should love the most is Binyamin. He's the son of his really old age. Well, not so old. I don't know how much older Yosef is than Binyamin. I have to look it up, but definitely he's older. He's from the same mother, and really, the Binyamin should be his favorite son, if that's the reason. So all of the Mefarshim, all of the commentaries want to explain what it means that he loved him the most because of this Ben Zikunim issue. And so, amongst other opinions, we're going to go to Rashi, because Rashi is the premier opinion. Remember, he rarely, maybe 2 or 3 times in all of the Torah, does he give his own opinion on something. Usually, he's quoting from other sources, and whether it's the Torah, the Talmud, the Midrashim, his other teachers. Sometimes there's an argument between the Midrashim and his other teachers, and you'll have to decide. But usually he's quoting somebody else. He's really a master editor more than anything else. So he translates Ben Zikunim as this. He says, he gives 2 opinions actually. He says the first opinion is Shenoda is Zikna. So this is the usual translation. He was born when, and Yaakov was older. Okay. Unklus Targim Barach Hakim Lo. So the way Unklus translates it is he's the son of his when he was old. Shalamid. Okay. Sorry, I take that back. So he says Kol ma shalamid b'shem ve'ever masar lo. So what he really loved him, says Unklus, says Rashi here in this opinion, is that he loved him the most because he taught him everything that he learned himself in the yeshiva of Shem and Ever. Remember, Yaakov spent years in Shem and Ever, 14 years, 24 years, whatever you want to say, years and years he spent in the yeshiva of Shem and Ever, and so he taught everything he learned to Yosef. Now, there's a whole lot of discussion about what exactly he learned there. This is not the time for that. Although, even though it was asked in shul during our question and answer period on Shabbat, but it happens to be answered here. Actually, 2 questions that were asked during the Q&A last week were answered in the first few psukim of this week's parsha. But anyway, not the time for now. Maybe we'll discuss it during the Q&A this week. It's becoming my favorite part of the week, by the way. So anyway, so let's just go on. So davar acher, so another opinion. Shaya ziv ikunim shelo domelo. And so the other reason is because his face resembled his face. He looked like him. In other words, he remembered, Yosef sort of reminded Yaakov of himself at his age. Now that happens sometimes. If you have a relative, you have a nephew or something or a child who reminds you of how you used to be when you were that age. So it's sort of like it creates a sort of relationship that's unique between you and that person, that's different from your relationship with anybody else. That happens. You like the same kind of music, or you have the same kind of interests, or you make the same kinds of jokes. Whatever it is, there's that sort of connection, that sort of kesher, is what Yaakov and Yosef seem to share, according to Rashi's opinion. And that makes complete sense why he would then be a favorite son versus all of the other sons, if the other sons were not the same. Now, on the subject of he taught him everything he learned in Shem and Ever, the Baal HaTurim points out that this strange word that we're translating as zikunim, as old age, that Rashi says means he taught him everything. What does zikunim have to do with teaching everything? So he says zikunim is not just a weird word. Zikunim is an acronym for something. It's the first letters of a word. And by the way, he gives several opinions of what zikunim could mean. I only brought here in the sources here only one of them. Zikunim, notrikun, zerayim, kachim, nashim, yeshuot, moed. The first letter of each word in zikunim stands for one of the orders of the Mishnah. In other words, Zerayim is the Zion of Zikunim. The Zion stands for Zerayim. The Kuf stands for Kachim. The Nun stands for Nashim. The Yud stands for, now this gets a little complicated because this is not one of the names of what we call the orders of the Mishnah, but it's in the Gemara in Shabbat, the order called Nizikin, which has to do with damages. That order, Shabbat 31a, calls it Yeshuot, rescues, right? So Yeshuot is the Yud, and the last one, Moed, that's what we call it. Moed is the second order of the Mishnah that deals with holidays and times of the year. That's what the Daf Yomi is learning right now, towards the end of Moed, by the way. With 3 more Masechtot, Ezrat Hashem. All right. So, and then we'll get right into Nashim. Exciting times. Okay, now we have one major problem with this Balaturim. Did anybody notice it? Is Benji over there? Benji, where are you? You should notice this. Zerayim, Kachim, Nashim, Yeshuot, Moed. How many are there? 5.
How many Sudar?
Oh wait, what? Oh, there's an extra one.
What?
Huh?
Ryan, look, that's 9.
I didn't want to put you on the spot like that. I'm sorry. I'll tell you right now. We should all know this because this is part of the Pesach Seder, at least the end when everybody's falling asleep. We are supposed to sing the song Echad Mi Yodea. When you get to the Shisha Mi Yodea, Shisha Ani Yodea. What's Shisha? Shisha Sidrei Mishnah. There's 6 books in the Mishnah. And Zerayim, Kachim, and Nashim, Yeshuot, Moed is 5, not 6. We're missing one. What's going on? Good question.
Taharas?
Yes, good. Yes, exactly. Taharos. Taharos is missing. So Taharos, which is the last Seder of the Mishnah, is not mentioned here. So there are a number of opinions on the Balaturim. Right? The Balaturim was an opinion, 600 years ago. So in the last 600 years, there have been commentaries written on the Balaturim to try to explain why is the Balaturim not mentioning the 6th order, what's going on here. So there's a number of opinions. I'm just going to mention a few of them, or really just 2. First opinion, it comes from the V'chut Lazahav, which is the most famous, I don't want to call it the most famous, but it is the most complete commentary on the Balaturim. It's like a whole book written commenting on the Balaturim. By the way, I've mentioned this in previous classes, but it's worth remembering. When we say Balaturim, it's a misnomer. This is not the Balaturim. This is actually the Kitzur Balaturim. He wrote a major commentary on the Torah, mostly explaining the Ramban, mostly, but not always, other things too. That's a major work. And then this publisher said to him, I don't know if you're going to be able to sell this. I don't know if anybody's going to be interested in a commentary on a complicated thing. Maybe you should lighten it up a little bit. So overnight, this is the story. Overnight, he wrote the Kitzer Bal HaTurim that we call the Bal HaTurim today. That's basically all the cool gematrias and Rosh Tevot and all that stuff that you can find in the Torah, mostly proving Rashi's actually, but not only all kinds of things. Every time that a unique word is used or used in a certain context, it's true somewhere else. So he does all of that. He wrote that book in one night, and that's what we call the Bal HaTurim. It's actually the Kitzer Bal HaTurim. Kitzer meaning shortened. All right. Anyway, so in the Kitzer Bal HaTurim, he does not mention Taharot. So there are a number of answers why. The Bechur Lezahav explains that one possible reason is because maybe Yaakov didn't teach it to Yosef yet. He's still teaching him when Yosef disappears. So maybe they didn't get to it. It's at the end. Right? Taharat is literally the end of the Mishnah. He didn't get to it. It's possible. Okay? I'm going to give you another answer. And this answer comes from Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who we're going to mention later in the class, God willing. Rav Chaim Kanievsky, Shlita, the Gadol Hador, has an answer too. And I have not seen, I mean, he's I'm not going to argue with him. He's, like I said, Rav Chaim Kanievsky. I don't have to say much more than that. I have literally no right to argue with him. But I will say I don't know where he gets this from. But he might have his sources all sorted out, but I don't. He says that originally, back before the Mishnah was actually written down, when it was still a memorized thing before Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi wrote it down. So when it was a memorized work, at that point, Kachim and Tahorot was one Masechta, was one big Masechta. All right, so that would explain why Yaakov teaching this Mishnah to Yosef, right, before the Torah, before the oral law was written down. So that would explain how he didn't teach this sixth Seder when there's only 5 Sedarim. And also assuming, by the way, that he learned this where, according to all this, he learned these Mishnayot, he at least learned to focus them in the yeshiva of Shemineva. Okay, that's the idea. What lesson can we learn from this? What's the takeaway here? The takeaway is a couple of things. If you haven't been following along, I'd like you to understand and appreciate one very important thing. We don't understand the Torah at all without commentary. At all. We think we know a word. We think we see the zekunim, right? We know the word zaken. A lot of us know the word zaken means old. So Ben Zekunim Hulo, he was the son of his old age. That doesn't make any sense. Think about it. He's not, okay, yeah, he was born almost last, not last, but almost last. But Yaakov wasn't old yet, and he wasn't it wasn't still running around in diapers, but he was older already, right? But he was not an old man by any account, at least by those standards. So it's a strange word, and we need to look into this. That's first of all. Second of all, a very important takeaway, a very good lesson to learn from all this, is the way to remember people is through the Torah that you learn with them. The way the people you love the most are the people you learn with. I've had lots of chavrusas, right? I've had lots of people I've learned with, and there's a special place in my heart for them. There's no going around it. I care about them a lot more than passing strangers. I might not see them anymore. A lot of my chavrusas, I have this curse that people I learn with tend to leave town, right? So that's probably true about most people in San Diego. So, but that doesn't. That's not. I still call them. I still care about them. We keep in touch. I have friends in Cleveland. I used to learn with New York, whatever, Israel. So there's something about learning with people that makes you close to them. That's what happened with Yaakov and Yosef. Yosef was close to Yaakov because he really learned from him. He really gained from his father's wisdom. And that's an important thing, and that's we'll be reacquainted to that later in the Torah in next week's parsha when he proves to his brothers that he is who he says he is by giving a certain gift, right? And that gift is supposed to hint to the learning that he did with his father, right? So that's how much he cared about the learning he did with his father. That was like, that's his passport. The Torah you learn with a person is your passport to that person's heart. Nice line. That should be a bumper sticker. All right. Anyway, or a meme or something. All right. Think about that one. So when I compile all my videos with like a greatest hits one day, that line will be there. All right.
To be the fundraiser for Young Israel. It's like instead of the magnets with the Shabbos thing, it's gonna be like bumper
sticker.
bumper
Good idea.
stickers.
All right, so very good. All right, so Lamed Zayin Chaf Daled. We're skipping along. We want to get out of chapter 37. We spent too much time on it last year. I'm kidding. There's no such thing as spending too much time on a beautiful parsha like this. So anyway, so Lamed Zayin Chaf Daled, 37:24. What did the brothers do? Vayikachuhu, v'yashlichu oto hapora, v'borik ein bo mayim. Famous line. The brothers took him, v'ikachuhu, v'yashlichu oto, and they threw him abora, into the bore, into the pit. And then the verse continues, v'habor, rake, was empty, ein bo mayim. It did not have water. Okay, a lot of questions, and we dealt with some of these questions in the past. Today we'll look at the opinion of the Ramban. The question is, why, if you're telling me that the pit is empty, when I tell you something is empty, right? I tell you, hey, look at my wallet, it's empty. What do you already know? What's in there? Nothing. If you found water in there, or money in there, or anything else in my wallet after I said it's empty, I'm a liar. When you say something is empty, it's rake. There should not be anything in it. Rake means empty, hollow, without substance, nothing inside. It is a vacuum, nothing. Okay, so habor rake ein bo mayim. It was empty, and it didn't have any water. So a lot of commentaries, and as I mentioned before, in the Ramban, who we're going to look at right now, all ask the question, why do you have to tell me that there is no water if it's already obviously clear that there is nothing in it? Of course there isn't water. Okay? So this is the Ramban actually on verse 22. He writes quite a bit on what's going on in this whole incident. And one of the things he writes about is this verse. He writes about this verse 2 verses earlier. Okay, so far so good. Just in case you want to look it up. So he says, "Vasipur hakatuv." The verse is telling us the story that the verse is telling us. All right. Yeah. Okay. It was empty. It didn't have water. Why? Because if there had been water in it, they would not have thrown him in there because that would have killed him. If there would have been water, if they would have known that there was water in there, that would have they would, by throwing him in there, they would have basically guaranteed his death. So that's why it has to mention that it didn't have water. According to V'chakatav Rashi, that's Rashi. That's not Rashi. So that's the Ramban so far. So basically, Ramban is saying that the reason why the pasuk had to mention that there wasn't any water in it was to excuse the brothers from basically trying to kill Yosef. That's not why they put him in the pit. it would have had water and they would have known it, then it would have been a problem of manslaughter, homicide, etc., etc. So it's not a problem of that because they didn't know that there was anything in there. There was, as far as they knew, there was no water, and that's that. So they weren't drowning him by putting him in the pit. Make sense so far? The cut of Rashi, then he quotes Rashi, and here's what he's going to argue. Ramban tends to argue on Rashi. Doesn't mean Rashi's wrong. Doesn't mean Ramban is wrong, but there are different ways to look at it. All right. So Rashi says, "Mashma shenemar v'abor rik einenu yodeh she'ein bo mayim." If it says it's empty, don't I know there's no water? Just like we said. What's the Torah trying to teach you? Ein bo mayim, mayim ein bo. It didn't have water. Aval nechashim v'akravim yesh bo. Lashon Rashi. Rashi says it didn't have water, but it did have other things. As empty as it was wasn't. It was empty of necessary, needed things, but it wasn't empty of snakes and scorpions. So it was actually a dangerous thing. So this is Yesh bo Lashon Rashi b'divrei Rabotenu. This is the Rashi quoting our rabbis from the Gemara in Shabbat Chavbet. The Imkain, and if this is true, Kain hayu nechashim v'akravim b'chorei habor osher ya'amok lo yadu behem. If this is true that this pit had all these dangerous things in it, the snakes and scorpions, then they must have been in they weren't just all over the place. They must have been hiding in little bumps and stuff in the cave, right? Or else the pit was very, very deep and the brothers couldn't see far enough in there to know that. Yosef. But if they had seen the snakes and scorpions, they witnessed it, they would have seen that they did not harm Yosef, right? These snakes and scorpions, which usually attack people in these kinds of situations, didn't attack Yosef. And if that's the case, what would happen? It would have been clear that there was a huge miracle happening to them. Jehu tzaddik gamor. And what does that mean? Nisim like this, miracles like this, don't happen to regular people. This happens to tzaddikim. So they would see that Yosef is a big tzaddik. Now what? That his merit would protect him from all evil. So how would they then harm the Mashiach Hashem, the anointed of Hashem? In other words, the one who Hashem is choosing, whom He loves and does miracles to save him. How could they harm him? It's similar to the idea that's said in the book of Daniel. Alahi shlach malachei v'sgar pum aryavata v'lo chabluni ki kabel di kadmuhi zechu hishtachachat li. My God sent His angel and basically closed the lion's mouth so that they wouldn't harm me. So there's a huge miracle happened for Daniel. So same thing, miracles happen for tzaddikim. In other words, says Ramban, the truth is then, avalheim lo yadu b'davar. There were snakes and scorpions there, but the brothers didn't know that. The brothers didn't know that. So why does it say that there's no water in it after it's already clear that it's empty? Now he's going to answer Rashi's question. If this answer of Rashi's doesn't satisfy him, he needs to answer Rashi's question some other way. The simple explanation, there could be more deeper Kabbalistic answers, and the Ramban is not shy to deal with that when that's the explanation. It didn't have any water in it at all, is what it means. It was empty. Because if it did have a little bit of water in it, you could still call it empty. Right? I tricked you. Because earlier I said if I gave you my wallet and I said it's empty and I open it up and there's nothing in there, obviously you'd say, okay, it's empty. But if there's something in there, let's say there's lint in there, or a penny, right? I can say my wallet's empty and still have a penny, right? I can say my wallet's empty and still have something useless, like an old paperclip or something, right? So does anybody even have wallets anymore? Anyway, whatever the case may be,
Benji has a wallet.
Sorry?
Benji has a wallet. And I have a weird purse thing.
Yes, I have a wallet too. We're old school like that. But in other words, if you say it's empty, it doesn't really have to be literally empty, right? It can be somewhat empty. In other words, empty of useful things. So v'chein ki met ata v'lo tichye. As similarly, there's a verse in Malachim Bet, which says, "For you are going to die, you will not live." In other words, why do you have to tell me both things? Obviously, if you're going to die, you're not going to live. The answer is klal b'shum panim. There too, it means that you will not live at all in any situation. Kol bi'ur v'chizuk, and this is clear and a strong proof. In other words, Ramban is not happy with Rashi's explanation that this verse is saying that there were snakes and scorpions there, because that doesn't help the brothers at all. And instead, Ramban wants you to know that the brothers didn't know that there were snakes and scorpions there, because if they did, and they would have realized that the miracle was being done, and then they wouldn't have continued the way they did. The Vilna Gaon, on this Ramban, the Vilna Gaon wants to prove this Ramban from the words themselves in the verse. Look at the words themselves. If you're watching the screen, you have the source sheet in front of you. What did they send him? Yashlichu oto habora, into the pit. Then the next word is v'habor, and the pit. What do you notice between the two spellings of bor and bor over here?
Feminine and masculine?
Well, okay. Oh, it's okay. Didn't want to.
It was like cast
yes.
to.
First of all, yes, it is. Habora means like into the pit, so it's a little bit different. But the shorah should be the word bor spelled bet vav resh. Now, just the complete spelling is of the shoresh. This is 3-letter shoresh. Bor, bet, vav, resh. The first word, abora, does not have the vav, and the second one does. Now, there's the first time it's written incomplete, and the second time it's written complete. Why? So says the Vilna Gaon, this proves, or at least supports the Ramban's opinion, because it's incomplete first time because they thought it was empty. But it's right, so they thought it was incomplete. They thought it was empty. That's why it doesn't have a vav. But the second time it says the word bor is we find out it was full of dangerous animals, which the brothers didn't know. It was full. Yeah, the pit was full, right? It was full of creatures. So that's that. All right, we're going to skip along a little bit towards the next few verses. We're still in 37. I know I said we'd get out of it soon, but it's just got to stay there. All right, verse 37. What happens is this is the selling. This is the actual selling of Yosef. Okay, and it says here, the brothers want to kill him. Yehuda says, brothers. So what's that going to help? So what's that going to do for us? We're going to kill our own brother. What are you talking about? We're going to shed his blood. That's not a good idea. What should we do instead? That's what we should do instead. We should drive our motorcycles real loud. Let's go and sell them to the Yishmaelites. Al tehibo ki achinu b'sarenu hu v'yishmu echav. Right, so we're going to sell it to him, and that way we won't be doing it ourselves. We won't be killing him ourselves. Whatever happens to him happens to him. It's out of our hands, it's up to whatever the mercy of these Ishmaelites. So in other words, let's make it so that it's not our direct responsibility. It definitely seems to be the momentum of the verse. And then these Midyanim came to him, these buyers and sellers, these traders, like Trader Joe. At Yosef minabor. They pulled Joseph out of the bor. Who's they? We'll find out in a moment. Vimkeru at Yosef l'Ishmaelim. They sold them to the Ishmaelim, the Esrim Kesef, for 20 silver pesos or whatever, 20 silver dollars. V'aviu at Yosef Mitzrayim, and they brought Yosef to Mitzrayim. Okay. So that's definitely the source of the idea. According to Rashi, you look at the Rashi, it says very clearly, Zuhi Shara Acheret. This is another caravan. He was sold many times. He exchanged lots of hands. And then Vishmechu Bnei Yaakov at Yosef Minabor. They the ones who took him out of the pit. They sold it. So this is Rashi. They sold them to the Ishmaelites. Ishmaelim the Midyanim. The Midyanim sold them. Sorry, the Ishmaelim sold them to the Midyanim, and he's not even done yet. The Midyanim the Mitzrayim, and then the Midyanim sold them to Mitzrayim. Okay, so that's that seems to be the direction we're going. So says the Rashbam, by the way, is the grandson of Rashi, and he has a very famous comment at the beginning of this week's Parsha, where he says that his intent is to really translate the verses in their simple explanation, which he thought was Rashi's intent. But very often, as we've noted in our class several times, Rashi doesn't give us a simple explanation. Sometimes Rashi actually delves into Midrashim, the Gemaras, Agadita, and gives very strange explanation when simple explanations that you would have expected are not what he says. So says the Rashbam that he had a conversation with his elderly grandfather, Rashi, before Rashi died, and Rashi admitted to him. He says in his commentary on this parsha, he says in this Rashi admitted to him that if he had it to do over again, he would give a simpler explanation of some of the verses. That's what the Rashbam says. So the Rashbam is really, really simple. Almost no agadita, like very simple human explanations, almost no magic or mysticism or anything like that. Very simple explanations to almost everything that he writes. So he writes that on this particular verse that it's not the brothers who took him out of the pit, but it was the Midyanim who took him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelim. Now, what were the brothers doing meanwhile? Great question. So for that, we're going to look at Rav Chaim Kanievsky. I told you we'd get back to him today. No kidding, no jokes. Rav Chaim Kanievsky is going to be part of this class. Can't fight me on that. All right, so where is it? Okay, so just so you know, it's not in the source sheet yet. I didn't have complete time to do it as well as I'd like, but I have it here on the screen. I'll add it to the source sheet later in case you want to look back at it in your free time. So he explains, going back a little bit, that remember the Yaakov gave Yosef a coat. We call it a ketonat pasim. So he explains that that the word pasim can be seen as an acronym for the four groups of people who owned Yosef in order, sort of. Okay, Pei stands for Potiphar. Right? He owned. He was Yosef's master when Yosef gets into his trouble. V'sochrim, those are the sellers. V'yishmaelim are the Yishmaelites. Midyanim and the Midianites. Right? Now, this is not, by the way, this is not original to Rav Chaim. He's quoting Rashi here, who quotes it in the name of a Midrash Agada. Right? But we have a problem. Akasha. Here's where Rav Chaim jumps in. Says, why is the Midrash counting the traders and the Midianites as two separate sales? Remember, Pasim, Potiphar, Sochrim, sellers, Yud, Yishmaelim, Mem, Midianim. Wait, aren't the Sochrim the Midianim? Aren't they the same people? What's going on here? So they're the same person, right? The verse said, as we read, Anashim Midianim Sochrim. There were people who were Midianite sellers, buyers and sellers, trader Midian, right? New store idea for anybody who's interested. All right, so okay, probably don't do that. Don't self-study him. All right, Rav Chaim explains that Yosef was sold to the Midianim traders actually twice. What does that mean? There are two different groups of Midianim. His brothers sold him to the Midianim, who then sold him to the Yishmaelim, and then they sold them to another group of Midianim who sold them to Potiphar. There's actually also the opinion of Dat Zakanim, so there's more people in this mix. Therefore, Rashi mentions that he was sold to the traders, or it's the first set of Midianim. The pasuk calls Sochrim, and then to the Yishmaelim, and then to a second group of Midianim. But we still have a problem, says Rav Chaim. The problem is still the final three sales are hinted at in the order in which they occurred, right? Sochrim, Yishmaelim, Midianim. Why is Potiphar first? Potiphar didn't buy him first. Potiphar bought him last. What's going on here? All right. It is almost backwards. The first one should be last, then the other three all go in order. So it's very out of order. Right? It's like he took the last one. It should be put him in the front. What's going on? So we have to understand this is a very, very important Yisod Gadol. It's going to help you understand a lot about Jewish history and Jewish thought, how we think about things. Potiphar is the buyer. Potiphar is the master in the end result. Right? So he is mentioned first. All of the people who he was sold in between, all the people bought and sold him in between, they're all just pawns in the game just to get Yosef to Potiphar in the end.
Oh.
Potiphar is Rishon. Potiphar is the main thing. Everything else is just part of the story. So you have to mention the end result first, the goal first. Not like when you write a book or when you write an essay or kind of like when you know what? Take that back. It's exactly how you write an essay. What's the first thing? Oh, this is not an English class. What's the first thing you're supposed to do when you forget about essays? Whenever you want to convince somebody of something, a headline, anything. What's the first thing you say? The headline, the main point. What's your point? You don't go into a roundabout speech proving this and that, the other thing, and then say, my point in all this, if you're still awake and still remember any of my points, my point in all this is blah, blah, blah. No, you say what your point is first, then you build up your case, and that's supposed to strengthen your thesis, right? That's the idea. Not like in a movie, right? In a movie, everything's supposed to be mysterious and confusing. Nothing makes sense until the last 15 minutes of the movie. That's normal, right? But that's not how that's or in a book sometimes. But
I think like Jake. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think J.K. Rowling said like when she was writing Harry Potter, she kind of had like the last chapter of the 7th book kind of in her like the epilogue kind of, or not the epilogue before, like in her
That makes
pocket, like
sense.
in her
That
mind.
makes sense. I don't know when she came up with it. I don't want to get into it right now, but I would suspect she really didn't have any idea where she was going with the book for most of the time, or else the Dumbledore would have used the time thing to go and kill Voldemort. Anyway, but I'm not going to get into it right now. The if you can travel in time, you don't have to.
No, really, that is a big question I have. Never mind. I'm going.
Yeah,
Sorry.
anyway, yeah. So I'm not sure how much she knew about what she was going to write, but anyway, but no, it's an important thing in the creative process. You have to have like a goal in mind, and what I really think is even more important. And forget about the creative process. When you think about Jewish philosophy or Jewish history, the end result is more important than what happened in between. Some things are too soon to sort of judge, the Holocaust or whatever. But things that are older events, you can look back and say, we know exactly why that happened, because such and such thing is the result of it. We know why, Esther was married to Achashverosh, even though 12 years later is when the Purim story happens. Right? Only 12 years later, the Jews are threatened. Like for 12 years, nobody had a clue in the world, except maybe Mordechai. Right? Nobody else had any idea why this nice Jewish girl had to be forcibly married to this terrible, evil king. And then, it made sense. So, in other words, the end result is primary, and all the things that happen in between are important too. We don't say that the ends justify the means, but the means are the most important things. The ends are the most important things. How they occurred over time, they're not the most important thing. Not that they're good or bad. We're not qualifying them. Just saying this as how we think in Jewish philosophy. All right. Anyway, so that's that. Let's continue with the source sheet, if I may. I think I may. That's not the source sheet. Liar. Did I do this? There you go. Source sheet. Ha. All right. Okay, so we have the Rashbam. We have Rav Chaim. Okay, we're going to skip the chapter. We have a few more minutes left. Oh boy, how are we going to do all this? We have a lot to do. We're going to do this. We're going to plow through. We're going to just do what we can. All right, chapter 38, verse 24. 38:24. This is the story of Yehuda and Tamar. Remember, Yehuda has relations with somebody who he thinks is a harlot, a woman of the night, and it turns out that it was Tamar who realized that he did not want to marry his youngest son to her, and she realized, the rabbis say prophetically, that she needed to be part of this family, and so she basically tricked Yehuda into having relations with her. And when she is pregnant and Yehuda is told, this is the chapter 38, verse 24, it says, Vayihi kimishlosh hadashim v'yugad leYehuda. About 3 months later, Yehuda is told, Lemor saying, Zanta Tamar kalatecha. Your future, your daughter-in-law-ish girl, is a zona, is a harlot. V'gam hine hara liznunim vayomer Yehuda hutziyuhu v'tisareh. And not only is she a zona, a harlot, but she also is pregnant. And Yehuda says the famous words of hutziyuhu, take her out, v'tisareh, and burn her. Burn her. What? Why? Now we have this punishment called burning. We have sreifa. That's one of the 4 death penalties that the court can impose. By the way, a court, not Yehuda, based on the case and the situation, etc., etc. So what are we talking about here? That we have Yehuda basically being judge and jury, deciding from one report that Tamar deserves the death penalty. So, and not only the death penalty, but burning. So we're going to look at the call of the Torah from Rav Eli Munk. And it looks a little something like this. Take her out and let her be burned. Rashi explains Ephraim Maksha said in the name of Rab Meir. She was a daughter of Shem, who was a priest, a Kohen, and so she was condemned to be burned, which is the punishment for a Bat Kohen in Judaism. She gets the death penalty for certain behaviors like this. But this justification is contested by Ramban and others from Halacha. Right? It doesn't make sense halakhically. We're not talking about a Jewish daughter of a prince of a Kohen. We're talking about Shem, we call him a Kohen, but doesn't have the halakhic status of a Kohen, right?
There weren't really Kohens back then.
Right. There weren't any Kohanim yet. What are you talking about, Rashi? On this point, Rashi's opponents hold that Yehuda condemned his daughter-in-law to death not on legal grounds, but by special right, since her loose behavior was an affront to his status as sovereign of the land. According to a simple explanation, it was probably the custom then, as it was even later in other countries, that when a married woman was unfaithful, her punishment was entirely at her husband's discretion. She's not Yehuda is not her husband, but she's kind of under his umbrella at this point, so he has the right to make these kinds of decisions. Accordingly, although Tamar had been promised to Shelah, and as such was regarded as his wife, because of his youth, it was his father who sentenced her on his son's behalf. That's one explanation. In other words, that's what used to be done. Is that in other countries, etc. That was a way to punish somebody was under the discretion of the family.
But wasn't Shla old enough though? Like, isn't that why she decided at that point?
Yes, exactly. He was old enough, but he, I guess, wasn't old enough for some things. He certainly couldn't speak for himself in any of this, so I don't know what to tell you. Another interpretation given by Balaturim, this is the actual Balaturim, not the Kitzur Balaturim, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, has it that what is involved here is not a sentence to a fiery death, but a mark made by burning, which would brand Tamar as a prostitute. So Baruch Epstein in Torah Tamima sees this point of view as being based on the following fact: the word be'esh, which occurs whenever the Torah speaks of death by burning, as in Leviticus 20 Leviticus 20 and 21:8, is absent here. The code of Hammurabi, the king of Babylon, from around that period of time, by the way, stipulates that unfaithful wives were to be branded with a mark on their foreheads. So this is Rav Munk. So in other words, this is not Jewish law that's being practiced here, but the law of the land at the time, and that the law allowed for women to be branded when they were unfaithful. Kind of reminds me, those of you who read it in high school, the Scarlet Letter, right? It was Hester Prynne had to walk around with the big letter A for adultery, etc. Anyway, so but I guess the Puritans were nice. At least it wasn't like branded by fire on her forehead. At least it's just a sign. It didn't have to hurt. At least. You gotta thank God for the little things. All right, so okay. Anyway, so that was the punishment Tamar was supposed to get. We know that punishment was stopped as soon as Yehuda realized that it was from him, and he realized what she had done and why she had done what she had done, and it admitted that he was wrong and she was right, literally in those words. Okay.
I'm still kind of confused. Like, she was a harlot in a way.
She pretended to be, correct.
No, but like, kind of was. But at the
she wasn't doing it for a living. She didn't go with other men. It was just this one time with him to have his descendants.
But Yehuda went for that.
Not usually. It was an unusual thing for him, as can be seen from the way he behaved. But
Right,
but yes, he did, and why he did is probably a question for another time. Simple explanation, according to most opinions, is he was basically out of his head. He wasn't in control of himself at that point. Hashem made him turn to that direction. Does Hashem do that? Does that still fit with the idea of free will? It's a big question. So it's a difficult question. Probably not one I can deal with recorded, in the last minute of a class. but these are things. It's okay to have things to think about. By the way, it's okay. You don't have all the answers to Parsha. That's fine. We'll have to deal with the last two pieces that we wanted to share today. We'll have to deal with them next year, I guess. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm gonna look at the video, but I'm pretty sure these two were from last year also. We keep dealing with chapter 37, we never get a chance to get to chapter 40. So this is that's how it goes. You can't always learn everything you want to learn, but we can try. Anyway, good questions. Speaking of good questions, I'm going to stop the live feed and the recording.